Hello, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to the second episode of School Daze. And with us today, we have Megan of Bobo and Chichi. What's up, girl?
Hey.
Hey. So listen, we're just so excited to have you on today. I remember a couple of years ago whenever I first came across your work. So if you guys don't know, Megan works along with her husband Scott, and they produce incredible time-lapse, hyperlapse films. And they're also very skilled photography, writing. Basically, when you think about jack of all trades, master of none, they're kind of like master of everything. Like they really know their stuff and just incredibly skilled, incredibly talented. So that's one of the reasons why we had to have them on this episode. And I think from the business perspective, that is an area that Megan absolutely shines in. And she really knows her stuff when it comes to negotiating and working with brands. And for this particular episode, Megan is actually going to be talking to you guys about how to license and upsell your photography to brands. And it doesn't matter what part of your journey you're on, whether you're a kind of like beginner content creator or you're advanced, you've been in the game for quite some time, this is definitely tips and skills that you can incorporate into your practices like right away. So Megan, what I want to do is just talk to you just a little bit, and then we're going to go jump right into your lesson. Now, in terms of working together with Scott, how did you guys start kind of putting together a process of, working with brands? Was this something that just quite came naturally, or was there some kind of like falls here and there?
It's funny because we actually didn't start working with brands for like the first few years of our blog and our content creating. We were actually living and teaching in South Korea at the time, and when we started our blog, and we were just making it for the passion and fun of it because we had a different job at the time.
When it comes to this idea of upselling and licensing your photography, like what was the aha moment for you guys? Like, why was it like, oh, okay, before you weren't doing that, and then there was obviously some type of transition, or were you just approached by a brand and then kind of figured it out?
So so Scott does the videography and photography primarily on our channels. I like it, and I think I have an eye for it, but because of our budget too, we only had one camera for the longest time. So Scott was the videographer, photographer, and I was the storyteller and business person. And Scott wanted to learn hyperflow or hyperlapse photography, which now he does a mix of that with regular video and calls it hyperflow photography. But he wanted to learn this style and passion, and then eventually he decided, I think I want to take this to a level and get paid for it and work for people and help them create their stories and spread their message.
What I'd love to do now is to actually just give you a bit of time to kind of walk us through your process and, hopefully really share some invaluable knowledge with the audience about how to upsell and license your photos for brands. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Feel free to share the screen, and the table is yours.
So I'm going to quickly go over different ways. If you are a content creator, this is going to be generally focused towards tribal content creators, but this can be applied to any type of content creator. The same basic principles and rules I'm going to go through quickly are great ways to upsell content that you're already creating and create a new stream of revenue for you, in addition to creating content for your channels. Destinations and different brands often need content for their marketing purposes and want to be able to share that without having to say created by so-and-so. So they might want to license your photography. I'm going to quickly go over different ways to upsell and potentially license your photography on destination marketing campaigns that you are already hired for. Something that's really important is we urge you to never give your photos away for free, because there's some serious value in digital media assets. Oftentimes, this comes from a completely different budget for brands from their influencer and content creator budgets for marketing. Sometimes I think people didn't realize the value in this and have accidentally maybe signed away their rights with their photography or videography and given brands access to this without charging for it. And it's something that's really valuable and something that you should be definitely charging for and valuing your skills with. So I'm going to definitely go over quickly how to create an extra source of income from skills that you already have. So why this is valuable is because brands are constantly need fresh imagery and content for their marketing campaigns. So whether it be print brochures, billboards, or their websites, they constantly need fresh images. They can't use the same images. I mean, some might, but most do not use the same images year after year after year. So what's great about this is if you're a content creator, you're already a pro at this because you're doing it for your channels. A lot of destinations specifically already have local photographers they might hire for probably 90% of the content that they have. But what happens is, sometimes there's content gaps, or sometimes, everybody has a different eye or different way of looking at things, and having a different perspective or a visitor's eye to a destination versus a local's eye is really helpful for a brand or destination because they're targeting visitors and tourists. And if you are a visitor or tourist, sometimes you have a different perspective or you see details that maybe a local photographer wouldn't. And what's funny about this is we actually got contracted out for a year for a destination to be their quarterly photographer for each season because we have the say visitor's eye. We find details that maybe the local photographers would overlook because the destination is so close to home to them. So that is one way that we were able to actually use this and upsell it to make a more long-term relationship with our photography as well, which is also an option for you as you get more familiar with this. Long story short, having a different perspective is often helpful, and that's something that you can also use when you're trying to sell your services or sell your photography, is let them know, like if they say, hey, we have a local photographer, when you reach out about this, you can always say like, oh, that's great. If, I have a viewpoint from a visitor, and if you want to look at our media gallery and take a look before saying no, this is a great selling point for you. There's a few different ways if you're already partnering with a destination or a brand on a marketing campaign to upsell your photography, as well as build your portfolio and create an extra source of income. And I'm going to go over how to do that. With destination marketing campaigns, there are two different ways. If you've already lined up one and you haven't talked about licensing your photography, don't worry, because I'm going to go over that on the next slide of how to bring up the topic after the fact that you've already completed the trip or completed the campaign or have already negotiated everything. But first, I'm going to cover, if you haven't done any of that yet, how to do that before and how to start the discussion and like the conception and negotiation stage of your campaign. So what we often do is when we're either meeting with the brand for the first time or talking to them, we often communicate that in addition to content deliverables for our channels and marketing the destination to our audience, that we offer licensing our photography for their digital media library for their marketing purposes, and that we could provide after the trip digital library for them to look through to see if there were any content gaps or any imagery that they needed to add to their marketing assets and their marketing library. And I usually do not require them to agree upfront if they want our imagery or to buy them. The reason being is I want everyone to be happy here. We like to build long-term relationships with our partners. And so I don't want to make them agree to anything that they might not like. So by doing that, you give them a chance to review your work because you don't want to make them commit to buying photos that they're not going to use or don't like. We always just say, hey, we'll give you a library to view afterwards. And if you like it, great, we can give you our licensing packages. If not, no worries. That's worked really well with us, for us actually. And they appreciate that you're not trying to be too pushy with selling them the photography either. So some tips that if this conversation goes well with the destination or brand, when you're discussing your deliverables and you're like, hey, I'll provide a digital media library if you're interested in licensing photography, I often try to read them and ask them, like, is this something that you guys might be interested in? And typically they're like, yeah, we'd love to review that and pass it over to our marketing team to look at after the trip. If this conversation happens, I typically ask for them to give me a wish list or communicate with their marketing department and ask for a wish list of maybe some photos they're missing or from the places that we'll be visiting on our itinerary. Something important to keep in mind is when we're working on these campaigns, typically we're dealing either with the PR agency or somebody who does like specifically influencer relations. And the people who would license photography for the marketing of these places are typically a different person. Like I'd have to say 95% a different person. So you need to make this as easy as possible when you're communicating with them and package the information in a way so it's really easy to pass along to the decision maker. So by asking for a wish list or asking for them to ask these questions to their marketing department, it'll increase your chances of providing photography or assets that they might actually need and use, and increase your chances of actually making the sale. Sometimes they don't have a wish list. Sometimes, and that's most of the time actually. One example I'll give is we asked this for a client that we were going to go do a trip with, and we were visiting a state park, and they had just built a new visitor center. But since they hire their day photographer that was a local photographer by a day rate, and they only do it periodically, they didn't have a photo of this visitor center, but they needed one. So we were already going to be going to the state park. That's not a photo we would normally take for our channels. By asking for that wish list and telling us, hey, while you're there, can you take a photo of this visitor center? We're like, sure. So we took it, and it ended up being one of the photos that they ended up needing and buying, even though I would never have taken that photo on my own.
Now, is this a technique that you think that any creator in any vertical, say lifestyle, food, whatever, do you think they could apply the same
Definitely.
advice?
Say if you're working with like a brand with a product, if you ask them, are there any additional media assets you might need that I won't share on my channels? I can try to photograph those for you, especially if you have a home studio or if you are taking whatever your campaign or message is. There's a way they might need detail shots that you wouldn't normally take, or even if it's just your hand holding a product with a beautiful background. We had actually another client where it was actually for pantyhose. And because we were in New York City and I took photo for them and a couple video clips, they ended up wanting us to go ahead and create a whole video for them because they realized they didn't have any New York shots.
Nice.
So and then we were able to license out a whole video, and they used it for their Facebook advertising.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so it's really interesting just by asking. So even though I'm focusing on destination marketing campaigns specifically for this, because we have the most experience in that, we have applied this and used it for lifestyle brands as well. And
Nice.
the same rules can be applied. And then after you guys have the conversation and after the trip, when you are negotiating with them, you can also tell them like, oh, this is a service we offer. Here's a sample gallery that we have. So you can kind of get an idea of the type of work we do beyond our social media channels or what's shared on our Instagram, because Instagram is always a very curated and like the top 1% of the content you create. If you're anything like us, we have hundreds of photos from a destination that are all amazing, but maybe only a few of them end up getting shared on Instagram or in our blog posts because you can only share so much. But really, we have a whole library of content that might be useful to the brand that they might never see. So a good way to give them an example and maybe spark interest with them in wanting to license your photography is give them a sample gallery. Even if you've never licensed photography before, you can easily organize. You're already organizing your photos anyway for your purposes. So just shoot them a Dropbox link or gallery that they can review and look at and be like, you know what, you do have a knack or eye for detail for these things. We'd love to see a media gallery after the trip. So these are all tips how to have this conversation or spark interest before. To recap, basically communicate it that it's a service you offer. If they're interested, ask for a wish list from the places you're going, and then also offer to show them a sample gallery so they can kind of get an idea of the range and scope of work that you do. Next, so if you already did a campaign or you already are about to start one and you haven't talked or thought about talking about licensing photography, here are ways to try to sell it after the fact. It's never too late after our first few sales in licensing our photography were all done after the fact. All the images that I'm showing you into the slide are also photos that we've licensed. So you can kind of get an idea of what kind of images that destinations or brands are looking for. One thing that brands or destinations might do, or the PR person that you're working with, they might compliment your work after they see it or after it's all come to life. And this is another reason why I like to try to sell, not make them commit to our work before, because this is a perfect chance to upsell your work. Once you create all your beautiful and amazing content, they're like, wow, this is amazing. This is exactly what we're looking for. This is the perfect time to be like, hey, you can license our work for additional usage for your marketing purposes beyond sharing on our channels. So you'd want to let them know that you do offer licensing and they can be used for their marketing purposes in addition to already being shared with your audience on your channels. I recommend sending them a digital media library with low resolution and watermarked files. We do ours on Dropbox, but there are other great resources you can use if you want to make it look a little more snazzy. Eulanda actually shared with me a really great one she uses. What was it called, Eulanda?
Oh, it was called PASS, PASS galleries.
So that's another great way to really package it really pretty if you want to spend a little extra time and create a pass gallery. Since we already organize all of our photos on Dropbox, we currently do it that way. Scott just batch edits all of them out with our little watermark on it, which you can see in the bottom right corner of this photo on the slide. That way, not that you would be working with anybody who would steal your images, but it protects your work by having your watermark on it and not providing the high-res images. But this gives them a chance to review it, pass it along to the decision maker in the marketing department, and see if there's any content they're interested in. And usually they'll let you know. We recommend keeping the digital media libraries as simple as possible. Don't spend too much time on something you don't know if you're going to sell or not. So we like to keep them very quick and simple and do a quick turnaround with these. Oftentimes we'll also batch edit all the photos with a natural edit on them. And we'll tell them if there's any different editing they want on any of the images, we can do that. Or the images that they do select, we will spend a little more time editing those and making sure that everything's perfect. So that's just something to keep in mind. So you save time and are more efficient. All right, the next part is, say they're interested and they want to buy your photography. This is the next step, and this is the most tricky part. It's pricing. You don't want to undersell your images or devalue your work, because if you do, not only does it hurt you, it hurts the entire photography industry. It sounds easier said than done, but it's a little complicated on how to price your photography and your work. And it all basically depends on how they intend to use it. So I'm going to give you a few pointers and tips on how to navigate this, and then how to, some tools you can use to help you license your photography if you're not familiar with it already. So there are two main ways to charge photography that I'm going to talk about. One is being hired as a day rate as a photographer, and the other is licensing images after the fact on either as a package or one by one. We're going to be focusing mostly on the licensing after the fact. We do get hired as a day rate photographer, but typically we don't do that when we're doing marketing campaigns as well as influencers or content creators, because we have so much other content that we're trying to create and stories we're trying to tell on our social media at the same time. When you're hired as a day rate as a photographer, that's usually your sole focus is collecting imagery for their libraries, and you hand over everything that you create, and they get to use it any way they like, and you charge a flat day rate. That's one way of doing it. But since we're most likely not going to be working that way on a destination marketing campaign or as an influencer, chances are you probably aren't going to get hired this way. But it is good to be familiar with this, because this is typically how they get a bulk of their digital media assets. And if it's a destination, they usually hire a local photographer like this. So that's why it's important to know this, so you can say, oh, are there any gaps in your content? Maybe the local photographer missed something. Maybe something new came up since they've hired them. That's why it's important to ask for a wish list. Now we're going to go over pricing, licensing on one-off, since you're not going to be doing a day rate and handing everything over. We're going to talk about how you can basically sell one-off imagery or buy packages of 10. But before you even get to the pricing, you need to actually know how they intend to use the images when you're licensing one by one. So questions you need to be asking, if they're like, okay, we love this photo, how much is it? You need to be like, okay, well, where do you plan on using this? Is this going to be for your digital marketing? Is it going to be for print? Is it going to be for both? If it is going to be for print, can you go into more details on where it's going to be printed? Is it going to be in a brochure? Is it going to be in a magazine? What's the circulation? That matters too. Is it going to be on a billboard? How long do you need to use it? Is it 1 year? Do you want a license forever? Sometimes they will ask that they want a photo, like they don't want to have a expiration date on it, and you have to kind of, as a photographer, tell them you typically don't need a license for perpetual use. And if they do want that feature, it often costs a lot more. A lot of times, since you are dealing with a middleman who's not the person usually dealing licensing photography, you have to like simplify this as much as possible, because it can get really confusing and tricky, and you can scare them off if you punch all this data in. They're like, I want this image forever to use any way I like. That license is going to be thousands of dollars. They don't need it for all those reasons. So you have to try to get them to dial down how they intend to use it, how long, so that you can get proper licensing rates. So to touch on what I just said, they might say they want a photo forever. We've had clients tell us that, and we were like, oh, you're probably going to be refreshing your content every year. So sometimes we've extended the license for 2 years, because there's no way they're going to end up using our photo for more than that typically. And if they do, they have to come back and ask us to extend the license or to create a new license. But it's really, really, really important that you ask all of these questions and find out their intended use so that you do price your photography correctly, and do not undercharge or overcharge for how they intend to use the images. Again, if they do print gets really tricky. I find web use to be the easiest to license out. Print gets really confusing because if they're going to say they're going to use it for a magazine, circulation is important as well. Because if it's just a small little local magazine, it's not going to be as much as if it's like some huge national magazine or going in something that's going to be spread out to hundreds of thousands of people. And then also that price is very different for print than, let's say, a billboard or just using it on their website. So different ways that you can actually figure out, once you have this information, you can figure out how to price it using some of these tools. I'm going to go over, we have a paid software that we use. It's called Product Photo Quote Pro. Scott has this because it has a lot more features and tools, and we were finding that we were doing this a lot more, so we invested in this. I don't recommend investing in this if you've never licensed your photography before. I only recommend doing this if you end up seeing a need and you're doing this all the time, and you want to elevate, the information and the access to how to license your photography. But for starters, I would just recommend using the Getty image calculator. It's for free. It has some limitations, but if you're just starting out, this is a perfect baseline of where to start. I recommend, before even getting into conversation with destinations or brands, to go to the Getty image calculator and start playing around with the settings, so it gets you familiar with the kind of questions that matter that you should be asking when you're having a conversation with the brand or destination, on what questions you need to ask to figure out how they're going to use the photos, because that matters for all the pricing. And last, another great thing to use, in addition to using either a paid or free software, if you have professional photography friends or you're in a community of professional photographers, ask them if your pricing seems off, or this seems like way too much to be charging for a photo. Because sometimes the quotes come back and you're like, whoa, I don't think they're going to pay that, because it comes back to be like thousands of dollars. It helps to ask people who have experience in this, because maybe there's a missing link in something you're communicating, and you need to ask a couple more questions before you come up with the pricing. Or maybe they can help you say, you know what, offer this license for this much. It helps to ask around, as anything is. When you're working and learning anything new, it helps to ask a professional. Sometimes, but different destinations or brands are different sizes, so they don't all have the same budget either. A very small town in, let's say, New York or Ohio, just because that's where I'm from, they might not have the same budget as like a national tourism board or a bigger city, right? Because they're really small. You might have to work within a budget. We've also visited countries that have, a different currency, or the dollar is much stronger there. So us asking our rates in US dollars is way out of price for them, and they have no intention in working with us. They can just hire a local photographer where they can get it within their budget. So sometimes you can make an exception and try to figure out what their budget is first, and try to figure out how you can work with them so you don't lose the sale. And as long as it's not completely devaluing your work, if it's something you can agree upon, keeping in mind that their currency is different or they have a different budget, it could still be a win-win for everybody. And those are great ways to also build long-term relationships. So to make things really easy and give you a baseline of pricing, even though we have those tools to use, something that we often do is just offer a package. This is our most popular way of licensing photography, and it makes things as simple and easy as possible, especially since, as I mentioned, many of the people that you'll be talking to are not the people who license photography typically, or are not familiar with it at all. And you have to make the information as easy as possible for them to pass along to the person who does. Or maybe it's a destination or brand that's only used to hiring a day rate photographer. So buying photos one-off isn't as cost effective for them. So by offering them a package or something, so it's really clear cut and easy for them to understand your rates, is the best way to go. And this is what we have the most success with. So we often sell for web use only. It's like our most popular way of selling photography. We have sold print use photos. And if they do decide they want print use, we typically will price that individually depending on how they want to use it. But here's a great baseline package that you could even start selling or adding to your negotiations or your discussions with brands that you're working with. We license our images. They're $250 for one image for 1 year for web use license only. This is pretty industry standard. If they just plan on using it on their website, they'll have it for a year. We've actually extended this to 2 years for a few brands that we have a really good rapport with, just because they didn't want to have to worry about, a 12-month expiration, but they knew they were going to be refreshing their media within that time frame anyway. You can also, keep those things in the back of your mind. I like to start out with this though, because this is standard rates. Something you can also do that's really common in photography is offer a bulk discount. So we often give them a discount if they agree to 10 images. We'll sell those for $2,000, so they get a nice little discount there if they buy more than one from us, and that incentivizes them to buy a package because they get a discount and they get 10 new photos, and it's a win-win because then you also earn more income as well. This is again for 1 year web use and that license only. If they want print, we'll discuss that as individually or separately. So an easy way to do your licensing contracts is just by searching for a template on Google. Legal Templates has a great one. This is important to do to make sure that you are protecting yourself, and it also makes you look more professional if you hand over a licensing agreement once everyone agrees to everything. But Legal Templates has a free template that you can use, and then you just have to change out a few of the details to basically your business and whatever the licensing agreement is, whether it be web use or if you end up doing print use, you have to put all that detail and you just basically fill in the blanks. Something to increase, now I'm going to go through a few tips to increase your chances of licensing your photography, because not all photos that you might take are worthy to the brand for their marketing purposes. Oftentimes they don't want to see, like, typically when you're an influencer or content creator, a lot of people have them front and center of all the content. And brands typically don't want that unless you're like a celebrity figure. And then that's a completely different ballpark, because then you're going to be basically having to additionally charge for your name and likeliness to be used as their brand. But we don't do that. We basically try to shoot photography that they might want to use on their marketing channels that kind of show the experience or the whole ethos of the brand that you're working with. If you get a wish list, like I recommend trying to get, always try to work from that if you can, because if you're already going to these places, you know the photos that they want, you have a better chance of licensing those photos. If you can, it's always best to keep strangers out, because you don't want to have to go around and ask release forms. You don't have time typically if you're on a campaign. You're working really hard to get your work and do the experience so you can talk about it with your readers and followers. So you want to try to keep strangers out unless they're really far away or you can't see their face. It usually typically doesn't matter. But anything up close with some stranger's face on it, you can't license those photography. So that'll also avoid legal issues with GDPR. But sometimes there's no workaround. For example, the photo on this slide is one Scott took on Brooklyn Bridge, and there is an anonymous couple up there. We don't know who they are, but they were having a cute moment. It's the back of their heads. You can't tell who they are. They could be anybody. This kind of photo would still be able to license. So you don't have to worry about having 0 people in your photos, because sometimes that's just impossible. But in a case like this, there are people, but they're anonymous and you can't tell who they are. So this would be a brand or destination might be okay still licensing this photo. For busy places like tourist attractions that avoiding crowds is just impossible. There's some tips and tricks that you could do as a photographer. Scott uses an ND filter and a long exposure with a tripod, and it gives like a blur effect on the people, or anything that's moving or has movement will have a little bit of a blur, and then everything that is fixed will be crisp and clear. On the next slide, I'll show you an example of how to do that. For those of you who aren't familiar with this technique, basically you have to change your shutter speed to a half a second or longer. and typically have a tripod, because the camera needs to be very still in order to get this effect. And you only need an ND filter if you're doing this photo in the daytime. At nighttime, you don't need an ND filter or to buy any additional equipment other than a tripod and your camera. Another thing you often have to do is you just have to have patience. Sometimes, if you're already a photographer, you sometimes have to wait for that moment, the clear moment, and stand there and wait until there's a perfect clearing and just be ready to shoot. So that's a great way to get those really busy places, or places that might have other people or Instagrammers, or just it's a great technique to have anyway as a photographer. And then last, to go over edits on your photos. A lot of people have a very stylistic way of creating content. If you do really moody edits or do light and bright edits, that's really great because it fits your cohesive brand look. But oftentimes brands or destinations that you're working with, depending on what it is, they might not want those edits. So for a destination specifically, typically, not every destination, of course, there's outliers, they want really natural edits. So they want to see it as you would see it if you were there. They don't want to see something that's like way oversaturated or too moody or too light and bright. And a great way to kind of dictate what the brand that you're working with might want is to look at their content and their current marketing. You might have to tailor the edits specifically to them. What we typically do is we will edit our way and have our library, and then we do a batch natural edit for them, and we present them the natural edits and tell them, hey, if you do want a different edit, we're capable of doing that. Just let us know. But here's like the more natural edit that goes currently with the color scheme of your brand. This is really important to do because, again, if you have a very stylistic way of creating your content, that might turn them off for licensing your photography. So it's good to just bring that up and let them know your range and let them know that you're able to create a natural looking edit for them. If you haven't licensed your photography and say you do really moody or stylistic edits as it is, you can make a media gallery of natural edits and then show examples of your edits and say that, oh, both of these are available. And sometimes you can ask them and they'll tell you, actually, we prefer your edit. Can you present a library with your edit on it?
So true, Megan. I think that's such a great thing that you've just shared because personal example, a few years ago, I think it was like 2017, we were working with a couple of brands in Chicago. So working with the Chicago Tourism Board and then some other brands there. And so one of the brands that basically said, you know, we had a contract with them to just create more like blog content, influencer type of content. And so we did, and then we did like some Twitter stuff for them, one of those like Twitter chats and stuff. So we did some stuff like that. So quite basic. And they then saw our content online and then said, well, how much would it be to license, you know, your photos? And so I said, well, I can put together the gallery, shared it with them. They saw it and they're like, well, these photos look different from the ones on your website. And I was like, oh yeah, we did a base, you know, for the natural edit. They're like, no, we want that stronger contrasty look with the tweak on the oranges and blues. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a preset that we've developed over time and whatnot. And then it's just so crazy. They ended up buying about a batch of, I think, about 20, 25 photos. And then just last year, they hired me again, flew me out to shoot all of their products for their food tours. It was like 2 days of shooting. And they wanted that specific edit. And they said that they literally changed their entire look across their website based on the look of our photos. So it does work to put yourself forward like that. And I love that you gave that example because it shows that you can be quite flexible with a brand and saying like, I can fit into your brand ethos. Look, we can create this natural look that is quite like standard, but then this is my own artistic look. And if it's available, if you want it. So I love that you guys do that and you really do promote that practice.
Yeah, it's really great because it's hard unless you talk to the brand of what they want. Or sometimes they see, like you said, they see the natural edit and they don't want that. We actually had that with a destination in Germany last year. They licensed our photography and they had a really natural looking edit on all the photos that they currently had. And we had a really orange and teal preset that we were using at the time. And we gave them both options and they chose the more orange and teal look. They like the more vibrant
Nice.
vibrant colors. So they ended up licensing those photos. So yeah, it all depends and they might not know what they want until they have it. And this is honestly where presets are your best friend forever, because if you already know how to use them, you can create a natural looking preset. And then what Scott does is he just batch edits everything, and then he
Yeah.
goes through, and if it's the colors seem off on a couple of the photos, then he individually edits those. But it gets a chunk of them done, and it gets them done quickly. And then you just go through and you just do the fine little details that
Yeah.
need to be tweaked. So that's a really great way to create, and you can present both galleries too, because a lot of people do such awesome work with their own stylistic flair to it. So
Yes.
that's probably why the brand was attracted to working with you in the first place. So that's just something, yeah, to keep in mind.
It's
Um,
awesome.
all right. And so I talked about the ND filter and examples of blurring people out in places. I'm going to go over a few different examples of ways that we've done that in our work. This photo of me in Japan, this is like the famous Shibuya crossing that's like really, really, really crowded. And we didn't license this photography. This was just for our page, but I felt like this was a good example of, I stood really still and everybody else was crossing, and Scott took that photo really quickly, and I had to hold my breath, but everyone else is really blurry. You can't see who they are. So it gives a really cool effect. And if there's, a big monument there or some famous tourist attraction and people are small and they're a little blurry, that's a valuable photo because you don't have to do any release forms. The people are anonymous, and it's a way to make your photo still, licensable. The photo on the top right there is at a beer garden in Germany, and this was for a client who wanted to showcase the beer garden. They wanted people in it, but with GDPR, you can't have people's faces in it, and we had so much other work to do. We didn't have release forms, plus there was a language barrier, so we were able to blur and post edit, blur people's faces out, and we presented it to them. We were kind of nervous actually, because we're like, oh, are they going to want this? They wanted people, but we can't possibly expect everybody to not be facing the camera with picnic benches. So we had to use a little bit of a blur effect on their faces, and they still used photos like this. And now that you know that this is a technique, you might actually notice it in other. Now that I'm aware of this, I see it all the time actually on different websites and marketing, where they make people anonymous just by blurring their faces out because they don't have models or they didn't stage the whole photo. And then the last one is an anonymous biker. We were at this cute little village in Potsdam, Germany. It's the little Russian colony there, and they had these really beautiful little houses. And you can bicycle here, and this kind of tells the story of what you can do at the destination. This is a walking bicycle path. And we didn't have bicycles, but Scott was able to capture a cyclist, a little bit of a blur. You can't tell who they are, but it gives you an image, like a feeling of motion. And it's not a stage photo, and it kind of gives you an essence of what it's like to be there. That's another great example and use of this blur effect, and that still makes your photos licensable. Something also good to be aware of too on your channels, because even with increased restrictions with GDPR and stuff, you need to be really careful about having strangers' faces in on your channels, especially if you're monetizing, and people's privacy is becoming more and more important. So that's it. Okay,
Fantastic.
so
Now
that's
that
basically everything. That it's supposed to be a quick little lesson. I know I talked a lot because I could go on forever about this.
No, it's so fantastic, and you just shared so many great takeaways. I think anyone that's coming in that maybe they don't have a lot of experience in this arena can start to think about it for future practices. And those that are already, working in any type of space, I think honestly, any vertical in industry, whether it's like lifestyle, food, anything within content creation, I think as a creator, you could be employing these practices, because I think it definitely translates to so many other industries. I mean, in time, I would love to just kind of end on this transition that we've been into, because we're working right now during an unprecedented time. I mean, COVID-19 is going on. A lot of work has dried up. I mean, why should creators be thinking about this in terms of licensing whenever they might not even be able to work with any brands?
That's definitely a right now is a game changer, definitely. But I think it's really important to try to use this time to learn some skills, or learn different skills, so that when things are open back for business, even though we don't know what that's going to look like yet, this is something that you can try to incorporate as an income stream. And then if not, even we don't know what kind of budgets brands or destinations are going to have, but they're always going to need, if they're doing any marketing, they're always going to need marketing assets. So it might be a time, even if you're not working on a said campaign, that you could even try to sell your photography from visits from the past or things
Yes,
you've
it's a
done from
great
the
idea.
past, as long as it's not it's evergreen content or things that they can use that didn't expire because it was like a one-time event or one-time thing. You can go ahead and even try to say, hey, I know that, times are different, but, or we're not going to be able to visit anytime soon, but if you need fresh imagery for your marketing, we have it if you want to review it. That's also a way that you can try to be creative with exploring your income options during this really unpredictable time.
And it is, it's just mind blowing. I won't even go there yet. So basically, too, are you saying that creators should start going through their images, maybe creating libraries, separating, siphoning off images that could really translate into potential work?
I mean, why not? We all have to get a little creative here. If work is drying up in the creative space and you have all this amazing content, why not try? I would try first reaching out to brands that you've built rapport with and are a great destination, are familiar with your work. Not even destination, great brand that are really familiar with your work, and reach out and tell them, you know, um, if you're looking for fresh content or fresh imagery, especially for travel, we're not gonna be able to travel anytime soon. You're not going to be able to have other people travel anytime soon. If you're looking for any of these assets, like I'm here, I have a library, I can send it over. A lot of times we've even sent digital media libraries when this isn't happening and they don't come back to us for quite a while until they need the images. They're like, oh shoot, we actually do need some of your images. Can we license them now? They didn't want them at first. And even though like I followed up and they were just like, we're good right now. And then they came back and they wanted it. So
Hmm.
it's never hurts to let them know that you have this option so that if they need it, they think of you first.
Absolutely. That's such great advice. Absolutely. It's like piquing their interest and then letting them know that the work is available. So
Yeah.
for future use. So, and when we've had that happen a couple of times before where the brand will come back. So but sometimes we forget to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely need to do it more often.
It's one of
So
those
thank you.
obvious things that's like, once you point it out, you're like, oh my God, duh, I
Like,
should. Or like, oh, they know I have photos. They'll ask me if they need them. And it's like, well, sometimes they don't think to ask you about it. Let them know. And then, by the way,
yeah.
let them know that you've only seen 10% of the photos that I took, because you can only share so many photos on your blog or on social media, because you have to curate that content.
Guys, I just want to encourage you, if you do have questions for Megan, like definitely comment on the video below, and also feel free to slide into her DMs, because she said she's more than happy to have conversations there as well. Also, Megan, I know that this is one thing we're really encouraging everyone. We're saying that if you've learned anything from this video, if you're able to take anything away from this lesson, to donate. And I know that you're giving that you've partnered with a charity called Give Directly. Is that correct?
Yeah, I picked for my charity to donate towards. It's called givedirectly.org. They help even beyond COVID-19. They help low income families or the poorest of families who need money to either put food on their table or pay their bills or keep their lights on. They help directly transfer money to them so that they have the ability to put food on their table right away. It's a great organization. They currently operate in over 8 countries. But yeah, they directly give money to low income families, and especially during this time where a lot of people are out of work. Not everybody has a savings they can live off of, and these were people that were already in low income situations even before COVID-19 or before the loss of income that a lot of people are suffering from now. So if you're looking for a great cause and it's within your means to help someone else out, this is a great organization and charity to support, since they're
Excellent.
directly helping families who need it the most.
Amazing. And we just want to encourage everyone, you are welcome to donate to the charity, on your own. But also we would love to be able to uplift the community and let them know, like, in terms of donating, like what's happening with donations. So if you do donate and you want to be kind of involved in that kind of shout out and bringing attention to how much has been donated to this particular charity, details will follow below. You can also go through PayPal or Cash App. So all details will be below. But guys, again, we're all in tough positions these days. So don't feel inclined to give. It's not compulsory. It's not required. But if you did learn something and you do have a little bit of spare cash or change to give, we're definitely encouraging you to give directly. To give directly. Hey, Megan, so I also know that you and Scott do teach and you run courses together. So what are you currently offering right now?
So Scott actually teaches his very stylized type of photography and videography he does, called hyperflow photography. So it basically blends time lapse, hyperlapse, and classic videography all into kind of a very cool motiony style video. He has launched a course for that. He actually offered it for free recently during this time, but now it's at a 65% discount for another week or so. So if anyone is interested in learning more about time-lapse, hyperlapse, or hyperflow photography, Scott is running a course teaching those styles. And if you have any questions on it, of course, you can always go check out his hyperflow photography or hyperflow masterclass page and ask questions there or learn a little bit about it. He has a free webinar too that teaches time-lapse skills that you can always watch to get kind of like a little sample before diving into it. But yeah, he has a really great course on teaching this very unique and difficult to master type of photography and videography on your own. And he makes it really simple and easy for anyone to use this to kind of apply it to the content that they already create.
Yeah, and I just have to say, guys, that was the thing that just brought me to you guys, was that I saw one of your hyperlapse videos and I was just like, wow, like who are the people behind this? And then upon a bit of further research and talking to a few people, I got led to you guys. And then I'm like, I love the brand name and I love the photography, bright, colorful, and just then being able to meet the two of you and see too how you work together and your relationship and stuff. It was just really it's always great when you see really incredible work and then the people or creator or creators behind it are actually really great people. So
Thank you. Right back at you too.
You're welcome. Welcome. So guys, definitely check it out. Sign up for that free webinar and definitely hopefully see you guys in the Hyperflow Masterclass. So again, Megan, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Seriously, for coming, spending this time and sharing with us some really invaluable tips on how to upsell and license our photography to brands. I really, truly believe that everything that you've shared today can be put into action right away, even while even while we're in this kind of like in-between time, things we feel like have been kind of dried up. But I think there's also very creative ways and very savvy ways of going about being able to secure work for the future. It might not be right now, but we can start to secure that for later. Mm-hmm. So, and I think you really did paint that picture and give us all lots more hope when it comes to our creative work and being able to license it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So guys, just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the second episode of School Daze. So make sure you're joining us next episode. We're going to have a very special guest, Eric Prince. He'll be talking about storytelling and his journalistic practices when it comes to photography. So again, guys, we love you so much and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.